My name is Emery, and I'm 30 years old. I never imagined that a single piece of paper could make me question my place in my own family. But that's exactly what happened at my sister's wedding. The day was supposed to be perfect. Soft music floating through the hall, white roses everywhere, guests dressed in elegance and smiles. But for me, it began with a quiet humiliation that burned louder than any argument. At the entrance, a coordinator smiled politely and handed me a paper badge. I glanced down casually, and my chest tightened when I read the words printed in bold. Limited access guest. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. This was my sister's wedding. I was her only sibling. I turned to my mom, confused, and before I could even speak, she leaned in and whispered sharply, "That means no plate. No plate. No seat at the family table. No place apparently in the celebration I was expected to smile through." I stood there frozen as guests walked past me, laughing, holding gifts, being welcomed like they belonged. My parents avoided my eyes. My sister, busy taking photos, didn't even look my way. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I replayed everything in my head. How I helped her pick venues. How I listened to her cry over tiny details. How I defended her when others judged her choices. Yet here I was, downgraded, quietly pushed aside. The words on that badge echoed in my mind, growing heavier with every step I took into the hall. I found my assigned spot, standing room near the back, away from the tables, away from the laughter. As servers passed by with plates of food, the message was clear. Watch, don't participate. Smile, but don't belong. I tried to swallow the embarrassment. But then I overheard whispers, distant relatives wondering why I wasn't seated with family, someone joking that maybe I was just a friend. That's when the humiliation turned into resolve. I remembered the envelope in my purse, the one I had carefully prepared weeks ago. Inside was a $10,000 fund check. My gift to my sister, a contribution to her new life. I had saved for months, skipped vacations, worked late nights, all because I wanted to support her. Slowly, deliberately, I looked over at the gift table. It stood proudly near the center of the whole, overflowing with boxes, cards, and envelopes. And suddenly, a thought formed, clear, calm, unstoppable. If I was a limited access guest, then maybe my gift didn't need full access either. I walked across the room, heels steady against the floor, my heart pounding but my face calm. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. I reached the table, spotted my envelope with my name written neatly on it, and picked it up. The weight of it felt different now, not heavy with obligation, but light with clarity. I turned, holding it in my hand, and that's when my sister finally noticed me. Her smile faded as she realized what I was doing. I walked toward her, past my parents, past the guests who suddenly went quiet. I held up the envelope and said clearly, "I think you won't need this anymore." The words didn't shake. My voice didn't crack, but the room did. My sister's face went pale. She ran after me, heels clicking, dress gathered in her hands. Behind her, my parents shouted, "Come back." Their voices echoed through the hall, desperate now, not dismissive like before. But I kept walking. Every step away from that room felt like breathing again. Outside, the air was cool, grounding. I paused just long enough to let the reality sink in. This wasn't about money. It was about respect, about knowing my worth when the people who were supposed to protect it chose not to. I didn't know what would happen next or how this decision would change my relationship with my family. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done accepting a smaller place in a story where I had always given my whole heart. And if you want to know what happened after this moment, how the truth unraveled and how the tables turned in ways none of them expected, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now because Chapter 2 reveals everything they never thought I'd do. I sat in my car for a long time after walking out, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my heart still racing, but my mind strangely calm. The image kept replaying in my head. My sister running after me. My parents shouting, "Come back." Like I was the one who had done something unforgivable. I drove home slowly, every mile creating distance, not just from the wedding hall, but from years of being treated as optional. That night, My phone exploded with calls and messages. I didn't answer any of them. Not my mother's tearful voicemails. Not my father's angry texts. Not even my sister's missed calls that switched between panic and accusation. I needed silence to understand something I had avoided my whole life. I had been the limited access daughter long before that paper badge. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my aunt, someone who had always been honest with me. She told me the truth I was never meant to hear. My parents had insisted on categorizing guests to manage costs, and when my sister hesitated about me, they suggested it themselves. They assumed I'd never make a scene. They assumed I'd smile and accept it. That's when the words from the badge hit me again. Limited access guest. That wasn't just about food or seating. That was how they saw my place in their lives. Close enough to invite, distant enough to dismiss. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door. No warning, no apology yet, just urgency. They said my sister was devastated, that the wedding photos felt incomplete, that people were asking questions. Not once did they ask how I felt. They wanted the check back on the table, the story repaired, the embarrassment undone. I listened quietly. Then I told them something they weren't prepared to hear. I told them that when my mom whispered, "That means no plate," something inside me finally understood its value. I told them I wasn't angry. I was awake. I explained that I had spent years proving my worth through sacrifice, through support, through silence, and I was done. My father accused me of being dramatic. My mother cried and said, "We didn't think you'd take it so seriously." That sentence hurt more than anything else. They didn't think I mattered enough to feel deeply. A week later, my sister asked to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. She looked smaller without the dress, without the crowd cheering her on. She tried to explain pressure, stress, parents handling things. But then I asked her one question. If I hadn't walked to the gift table and taken back the $10,000 fund check, would you have said anything at all? She couldn't answer. Silence filled the space between us, heavy and honest. That was all I needed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply told her that family isn't about access levels. It's not about who gets a plate and who stands in the back. It's about presence, respect, and choice. And she had made hers. The story didn't end with reconciliation like people expect. It ended with boundaries. I stopped overgiving. I stopped explaining myself. I invested that money into my own future instead into things that didn't require me to shrink to belong. Slowly, my family realized that I wasn't coming back to the role they assigned me. The irony is once I stepped away, they suddenly wanted full access to me again. But access, like respect, once limited by others, must be re-earned. Looking back now, that wedding was never about my sister starting a new life. It was about me ending an old one. The version of myself who accepted crumbs and called it love. The badge, the whisper, the walk to the gift table, the words, "I think you won't need this anymore." They weren't acts of revenge. They were acts of self-respect. And every time I remember my parents shouting, "Come back," and I smile because for the first time in my life, I didn't go back. I moved forward.